now we're back, after a bit.
Alright, so let's see what comments we've got today. I'm waiting!
We start off with Super Cool Guy 13, who reminds me of the fact that, for the last time, this is not a cool-off. This contest is not a cool-off. Jesus.
If you ask me, this one goes to Sonic, as I believe he is much better at doing good than Bart. Bart only causes chaos and misery to the people around him, while Sonic at least attempts to fix things. Also, I imagine Sonic would come up with ideas for games, and if anyone knows what fun and adventure means, it would be Sonic. The biggest point I can think of, if you ask me, Bart couldn't be able to come up with comedy that Simpsons fans would enjoy, while Sonic could come up with games that his fans would like. Sonic FTW! I got a juice! Whoa!
I'm gonna say that while Bart is known as a troublemaker, he has his emotional side to him, and I think if he really gets into it, he'll learn not to be an asshole to the people he's trying to collaborate with.
He has emotional moments for sure, but more often than not, he's ended up forgetting them a few episodes later. That's just kind of the nature of cartoons. Not to say Sonic is some omni-complex character, but I think that renders your point kind of moot. Also, would Bart even be okay with being ripped from his world to do any of this? Sonic is shown to be alright with these type of situations, but I'm unsure if the Bartman is going to be as willing.
Talking Bartman, in that, guys, he's teamed up with Radioactive Man, a fictional comic book character in his universe, as well as accidentally bringing Itchy and Scratchy from the TV into our world, and going with them to a few other shows. Not to mention that he and his family have met the creator of their own show, Matt Groening, I don't know, as well as a few other Simpsons creatives, like Conan O'Brien, a few times before. He even talked to Grover from Inside a Framed Picture. You may doubt the canon and reality of some of these things, but it shows that Bart is no stranger to such metafictional travel concepts. Now let's dig further into the comments with Muddy Mole. One thing I think should be noted here is that Bart is 10, and The Simpsons is aimed at a slightly older audience than that. I'm not sure if Bart would have the social savvy to make all the social commentary and subtle jokes that the Golden Age Simpsons episodes are known for. Not even going into the fact all the real-life Simpsons writers are Harvard graduates. Bart is a kid, yes, but Sonic is also an immature teenager, but they're both working with all these writers and game designers, and are not the sole creative forces working on these projects. They're really more working as a shot in the arm, so to speak, and it's going to drum up interest either way to have both of them in real life. The question is, who will capitalize on that better and keep the momentum going in a positive direction?
I will say, despite siding with Sonic, I'll agree with Ducko that this comment is underselling Bart's capabilities. And either way, it's not just Bart and Sonic working on these shows, they're just helping their respective teams. That being said, I do finally want to bring up something I've been meaning to about the arguments in part 1. Ducko, I don't think you ever mentioned what specifically caused the Simpsons' fall from grace. That being the change in writers and staff on the team. Whereas Sonic Team basically stayed the same this whole time, can Bart really prevent these people from jumping ship?
Again, that either are in reality at all will renew interest, which may potentially keep some of the Golden Age Simpsons writers around. Whereas Sonic Team always being the same, but going from games like Sonic 2, Sonic 3 Knuckles, CD, and Adventure 1 and 2, the advanced games, and Sonic Rush, to games like Sonic 06, Sonic Shuffle, Sonic R, and Sonic Forces, puts into doubt how consistent their track record can be. And in most of those cases, the problems were rushing the games. Again, who here is known for not taking things slow most of the time?
Who was known for not taking things slow. Was. In my opinion, you're painting Sonic to be solely his persona from a time frame where he was impatient enough to jump ship when the player wasn't pressing any buttons. Sonic in modern times has definitely shown his ability to slow down when helping with things. Just look at the times he sits down with Tails and helps him build things, not rushing them, but being patient with him. Some games are doomed to fail from the start though, and others would be better if given more time. Why would Sonic go back and rush things knowing that only make things worse? He's not as one-dimensional as you paint him to be.
Number 69. Damn, both sides had very good points, and it makes it very hard to pinpoint a clear winner. Although I feel as though something wasn't factored into here. The possibility that Sonic or Bart could interfere with one another's production of their respective revivals. Both are known for their mischievous behavior, more so Bart, but Sonic has his wisecracks and is a hothead. So by the off chance, if one of the two starts falling behind production, the other character would probably start to plan something very bad in order to halt or even cancel all that hard work that the other character tried to achieve. Without this in mind, I would give Bart the edge, and admittedly he does have better experience. And while not as self-aware as our favorite blue blur, Bart can also be self-aware when he wants to be, to the point that it isn't as moronic as Sonic's. However, when factoring in the Sabotage factor, and he said factor twice, things get interesting. On one hand, you got Bart's pranks, which will be sure to put a wrench in Sonic's plan. While on the other, Sonic's speed would be tricky for Bart to deal with, meaning Sonic could screw up an event or something without anyone knowing. The big problem with that is while Sonic and Bart's reputation are put in jeopardy, again, the two would be throwing so many jabs at each other that eventually they'll have to meet face to face and get into an intense argument, maybe even starting a big fight. While Ducko forgot to equalize stats, to be fair on Ducko, this idea isn't a flat out fight, so it's understandable why the stats got ignored, meaning Sonic would absolutely shit stomp. It wouldn't look good on Sonic's behalf, and he would risk being on the run from the cops. The way that I see it is, A, the two throw in so much shit at each other that Bart manipulates Sonic into beating him in a fight, therefore fucking over Sonic's reputation, or B, Sonic can hold out long enough to screw over Bart to the point where all hopes of reviving the Simpsons ends up becoming void. Unfortunately for Sonic, Bart has more experience of hatching way more schemes, on top of his already existing advantages, meaning that Bart would probably be the first one to sabotage Sonic, enough to the point where he and his developers can't work anymore, even if Bart risks an actual confrontation that would result in an injury or two. Sorry, Sonic, you might be speedy and stronger than Bart in a fight, but Bart has all the necessary advantages to pull through and revive the Simpsons to be in a much better state than it is in right now. With that out of the way, I'd appreciate if you would all go watch My Hero Academia Abridged. Thanks! Ah! That's me. That's the noise I make whenever I smile. I can't believe Ducko just self-promoted. Blah.
Sabotage? In this scenario, I don't think either can actually interact with each other, or the other way around. We're just trying to see who does better, as opposed to who can screw each other over.
I'm fighting for the honor of Bart, but if any one of these two are going to try dirty tactics against the other, it'd be him. That said, I don't think he'd go too far, considering he isn't on the level of, say, Cartman's evil. Not to mention that in a fight, Bart may have a better chance than you'd initially think, given his career as a superhero, his abilities to fight the space mutants, the various years of Simpsons material, both episodes and comics, and things like that. Not even including Treehouse of Horror type stuff, mind you. But Sonic would not try to beat up some kid anyways. Even you said that.
Well, if he wanted to, he totally could, because, I mean, come on, Sonic's the strongest fictional character of all time.
Sonic absolutely is not that, especially compared to truly powerful beings like Gumby. I've written something that proves this. But while both would fall to the green one's might, we're only discussing blue and yellow. Yes, if you're paying attention, I also sort of said something similar to the last video's description. Now for some different green, with the guy who went from being an avocado to being a weed. I didn't expect rooting for Sonic to be the unpopular opinion, but there we go, I guess. Despite going against the popular vote, I'm still going to root for the blue blur. People have issues with both series nowadays, but with Sonic it's always fixable issue, whereas with The Simpsons it's just that they are still going. Bart's only way to really win this is to get his show cancelled, which I feel would probably be an absolute last resort. I don't think even the best writers could keep The Simpsons great for much longer than the golden age of the show, and especially not for the 30+ seasons they have nowadays. And even then, the case could be made that Sonic could just get his series cancelled early as well, which would have the classic games held in similar regards to early Simpsons. Sonic is the only one of the two who has options beyond that. And since the Chaos Emeralds make it so that Sonic has a method of time travel, assuming he has them at least, then the argument that his impatience would screw him over wouldn't be a factor anymore, since he can just go to any other point in production and make sure that things are running smoothly. The argument could be made that Bart is more likely to sabotage Sonic than Sonic would be to sabotage Bart, but as far as I can tell, neither of them are aware that the other is in the same situation as them, and it's not like they're directly competing against each other. So, even if they did know about the other making more progress than them, there would be zero incentive for them to do anything about it. So with all that being said, I definitely have to say I'm siding with Mega Man. Oh boy, that accent was not an attempt at Biffweed's accent. Just after a while I gave up doing that, and instead I decided to imitate his text-to-speech. Yeah. I don't think Bart has to keep Simpsons going for the full 30+ seasons to succeed at this. Mind you, there are plenty of shows that get reran a lot, with plenty still remembering it and asking for them to be kept around on streaming services and such, like Friends, The Office, Seinfeld, and so on. What Bart needs to do, really, is to keep it going in a healthy direction. I think the initial spark of Bart in real life will be enough to boost for a bit, and if it ends after a bit, I think it'll go out on a good note.
That's much easier said than done, though. Sonic at most is releasing 1, maybe 2 products a year for the games. At most, mind you, as a big thing here is him having to slow down production or axe games that are doomed from the start, whereas Bart has to manage an episodic series, which potentially is weekly. This leads into my point from earlier, that I don't know if Bart is fully committed to this becoming his fate. Ash Ketchum said it best himself, being a slave isn't fun.
He ain't a slave. All that sand turned your brain to mush. I think you need to stop smoking all that biff weed. I'm getting off track and we make too many ERB references. Neither Bart or Sonic are forced to stay here forever. They're just trying to right the ship in the amount of time that they can, and maybe coming back as creative consultants if their advice proves fruitful.
But it's going to take a lot more commitment and time for a cartoon to show its worth than a game. The second Bart leaves, it can only take a few weeks or so for things to snowball back downhill. Bart's making a much larger commitment, as opposed to Sonic, who can basically lay out the groundwork and blueprints of what games are and aren't safe to produce. Now on to Garfield.
I'm gonna have to go against the popular vote here and say Sonic wins this. Even though the way this is structured is not really like you're competing against each other here. So I guess it's just he'd be more successful then? Anyway, while it is true that both series have been rocky as of late, I think the differing reasons as to why is the main factor here. While game development and making an animated series are similar in some aspects, they're still different mediums, and as such, the reasons of them being good or bad will differ. Sonic's bad games are bad because of poor design choices or execution, rushed development, or both. However, these are issues that can be corrected from one game to the next if they learn from their mistakes. Since the Sonic series doesn't usually worry itself of overarching narratives or limit itself to one particular style or setting, I think there's a lot more room in terms of what can be done creatively to keep things familiar, but still exciting, which I know is what they have been doing with Sonic, and it hasn't always worked out, but this is a hypothetically successful situation. The Simpsons nowadays is bad because it's running for just a little over 3 decades now, and it's clear that people behind it are out of ideas and don't really care anymore. No matter how creative or experienced in the field you may be, working on an animated series for that or potentially longer is going to result in it running on fumes eventually. At which case, I believe there's only so much Bart would be able to actually do to keep the show fresh, before he too feels the fatigue of having to do up to 30 seasons of a show with the same characters and same setting, etc. I also want to address the argument that Bart could simply convince the showrunners to just cancel the show and let it be left alone as a cult classic. While this is a viable option, I would like to point out that the purpose of this challenge was that the character has to salvage the quality of their series in the modern day and keep it revived. Because of this, I think if the Bart did resort to this, that would technically mean he failed, since if he resorts to that, that means he couldn't salvage modern Simpsons, or prevent it from becoming what it is. Sure, merchandise and spin-offs can help with relevance, but they don't typically do much. Same would apply to Sonic, by the way. Last point in favor of Sonic, while he is usually impatient or cocky, I think if we do go with the stance that he, as in the character, is fully aware of his modern day reputation and quality, that he would also be smart enough to understand some things are better off not rushing. And one thing I can say for Sonic today, that I can't say for The Simpsons, is that there are still positive qualities to the series that fans do enjoy, such as the characterization in the IDW comics and Sonic Boom, which he could convince the devs to implement into the game's stories. Meanwhile, Bart wouldn't have any frame of reference for what they could take from the modern era, since no one seems to have anything related to it that they can clamor to. So yeah, that's my prediction.
As far as competition, they aren't directly trying to throw a wrench into each other's works, but I suppose I'll say they're both aware of both events happening. But really, the win situation is leaving a good legacy for both over trying to stick it to the other person. As for some other points, Sonic acknowledges his problems, but doesn't fix them. If they are so easily fixed, and he knows it, but doesn't fix anything that much, aside from a fan game being highlighted and given a bigger budget. Could he do that at this time? I'm not sure, given the difference between technology and fan culture then compared to now. And regarding The Simpsons running too long being the real problem, I've acknowledged this. It's not bad if The Simpsons ends sooner after an initial Bart spark that helps them for a bit more, and transitions to occasional specials and other side materials, given that many animated series and sitcoms have kept their legacies alive and mostly untarnished without having to go on forever, non-stop.
Well, some games conceptually are doomed to fail from the start, as I've alluded to before. I think games like Forces would actually be pretty good if given a rough polish. As for Bart ending his series early, doesn't that contradict the whole point of this? I don't even want to consider the in-universe consequences, but I don't see a reason why Bart would want it to end. He seems perfectly content and happy in modern episodes, even singing Baby Shark. The one thing he isn't happy about is being bought out by Disney. Thus, he tried to elevate the series as much as possible to escape being bought out, which would eventually lead to its fall as ideas would be exhausted left and right.
I mean, being fair, maybe the butterfly effect leads to no baby shark doo-doo. Doo-doo. Whatever. And keeping the interests of writers around being in real life, and thus having growth and change affect him more, will do Bart good as a writer. Having seen Last Action Hero, we know outside of a fictional world, characters can be mentally affected by the real world. But considering both are already aware of it, I would consider the other impact that it can have, learning more new, valuable lessons from it. Who is more likely to keep this in mind? I feel it's the more introspective Bart, but I may be repeating myself.
Sonic coming to life would be just as impactful in the gaming industry. If a real video game character came to life, I'm sure a lot of non-Sega developers would want to come on board due to this strange occurrence.
Both coming to real life would be impactful to their respective fields. Let's not deny that. But let's also not deny Zach Homer. Zach Tomer.
Bart Simpson wins! As in the Sonic universe, it is confirmed that being yellow makes you stronger. And that's why Sonic needs to collect 7 emeralds to make himself yellow, even though he can just pee on himself and get the same effect. But Sonic is too cool for that, even though he's naked, except for shoes and gloves, and thank God he's not a female. Otherwise, his show would have to be rated F for furry. What am I even talking about? Time to take a piss.
I don't quite know what this means. Peeing on himself to give him power? Rated F for furry? What are you talking about?
You're the one who, and I quote, wanted to pee in our cereal.
Only as a sign of disrespect. If you don't cross me, your cereal will remain as is. Okay, we've talked the piss enough. Now let's talk Max.
For this match, I have to hand it to... Why am I doing an impression of myself? I'm me. For this match, I have to hand it to Bart Simpson. A lot of what Ducko said, like Sonic being aware of his series having gone downhill but doing nothing about it, and Bart being able to cancel his show so it ends on its prime, really stuck with me. Especially that last point, because I think canceling the show was actually something Bart would realistically do. On one hand, Bart is self-aware like Sonic, and has poked fun of his own series. But unlike Sonic, I think Bart is someone who'd actually be content to just slow down and stop his series while it's good. Sonic isn't the kind of guy to quit, so he'd probably keep going until his fans find something else to hate about the series. Sonic's fan base is way pickier and divided than the Simpsons fans are, and there's almost no way for Sonic to make everyone happy. On the other hand, Bart doesn't want to spend the rest of his life as an executive at Fox. He wants to be a normal kid, so he'd have more incentive to just cancel the show and let its legacy go on as one of the best cartoons of all time. This is about fixing the series, not going on forever, and if Bart simply did that, he'd save The Simpsons. In regards to Sonic taking ideas from Mario games to do it before them, I suppose that could work. If Sonic were a rat bastard, I don't think it's in character for Sonic to basically steal off someone's homework. He's a nice guy, and both he and Mario are friends as of the Olympic Games. Why would Sonic want to spell doom for the Mario franchise in order to better his own? That's no good.
I've talked about a lot of these points already, and I'll say again that Sonic's honor will indeed prevent him from doing underhanded things.
Yeah, Sonic is a nice guy, but he's also not as rash and impatient as you presented him to be. And he's not homeless either. He lived in a house in Secret Rings, Boom, and even Sonic X. But like I said earlier, I actually disagree with Max in believing Bart would have the mentality to slow the show down. Him lacking the self-aware nature Sonic has means he has less drive to even fix these problems.
Little did you know, there are several episodes that demonstrate that The Simpsons know they're in a TV show. I've already mentioned several meta-Simpsons moments, but I'll also point out the likes of Behind the Laughter, The Simpsons 138th episode Spectacular, where the character and actor Troy McClure directly engages with viewer feedback. That was Troy McClure, but both of these demonstrate that the characters can be aware of their audience when necessary. Now let's go to something super. Super CJ, that is. Certainly.
Personally, I think Bart's got this in the bag because of his beautiful anime cheer-smacking powers. He has a big brain, animation skills, and not to mention, as Ducko said, he even took over the Fox Kids at one point. This leads me to believe that Bart is more better with entertainment than Sonic is with children, and we all know there's technically more children than adults. You can't fool me, children who watch Family Guy after their bedtime. Baby emoji, man emoji, 2 more man emojis.
I don't know what beautiful anime tear-smacking powers are, but I suppose I can agree with Bart appealing to a potentially broader audience. That's something I didn't quite consider. Both are quite popular, but generally, adults who didn't grow up with Sonic aren't as likely to be into it as a general family audience, who might watch The Simpsons on a Fox Sunday night. Anyways, let's go to Epic Monkey.
I feel like I have to side with Bart on this one. His experience gives him the upper hand. Also, I don't think Sonic copying Mario or Crash would really help. Since he's in the 90s, with limited 90s technology, the only game he could realistically copy at the time would be Mario 64. But that feels too Mario of a game, to where it would be obvious that Sonic tried to copy Mario. So, I feel like he would still be in Mario's shadow, even with traveling back in time, which would really hinder Sonic.
This is a point to be made. Not only would Sonic not be able to copy these other games properly, I don't think he actually would copy these things in the first place. He's supposed to be honorable as a hero.
Fair enough. I actually failed to consider the hardware limitations at the time. Though, he doesn't even have to copy them one for one. He's still aware of trends and what makes games good, even outside of his own series. Maybe a Sega Smash Bros?
Sega Fighters Mega Mix Deluxe sounds cool and all, but it may not have as much staying power as Smash, unless Sega really commits to keeping series other than Sonic around more consistently. But anyways, speaking of Smash, here's Brawl's top tier.
Oh great, a leadership competition of supposedly dying franchises. This, oh my, where to begin? Both sides have strong points, with Bart's leadership skills and experience rivaling Sonic's self-awareness and future assurance. Bart has done actual roles where he was a writer and the one in charge, whereas Sonic hasn't had such with game making, meaning he's clueless and would need to sacrifice time, in a position where every detail is key. And all the juicy, good necessities need instant information and villains in order to meet the quota. Not knowing every what and how would be a serious issue in standards and production, which means Bart could just plan ahead and stay 3 steps ahead, due to his childish creative mind. However, Bart's not perfect either. Unlike Sonic, he's more of a one-trick pony, and has done that with a stigma to where his main inspiration comes from, Itchy and Scratchy. It's the way he gets his comedy and writes it, not to mention the reputation of Angry Father comics. I misspelt on purpose. Where his greatest flaw comes to play. He can prove that he's a third-dimensional character, but has done so less than Sonic has. Fleshing out on that would give the Hedgehog characterization and consistent yet mainstream fun plot focus to the point that Bart would struggle to keep up in terms of quality. Finally, Sonic's self-awareness can keep poking fun at the past, not just on the joking side, but also keep his workers informed of what worked and what didn't. However, the only issue with this is becoming a one-trick pony if he never branches out. So, it's hard to say, yet I'd give it to Bart on one specific and crucial notion: time. Thanks for the tip. It's here that time is not Sonic's friend. Ironic in all the yes. Sonic's lack of expertise and skill in terms of handling game production is already bad enough, whereas Bart's initial edge for him was experience and knowing many of the ins and outs. But remember how patient, headstrong, and time-insensitive the Blue Blur can be, leaving Win too idle with the player in the retro games, always commenting on moving fast or wanting to, keeping his cockiness even after 6-month torture, like in Sonic Forces, is where the line gets drawn, with no realistic concept on how long and necessarily overdone every game becomes. Sonic's gotta go fast motto is going to be what drives this franchise into the ground. Specifically, overburdened workers will either A. quit, or B. do the bare minimum, in which they do as little as possible as the Blue Blur says for consistency, or do it all while risking many a bug and glitch. And seeing how Sega caused such mistakes by rushing their workers, repeating that issue will never remedy it, but rather repeat time. Not to forget, Sonic in character doesn't really care about time travel. And even if he could utilize it, the lack in self-awareness, plus his headstrong and quick-minded attitude, could just call for another mistake. Thus, I believe the experienced and more patient Bart would win. Sorry, Sonic. But for me, you only sped past your chances of redemption.
Sonic having no actual experience in these areas is really what is preventing me from siding with him yet. Not to mention I really don't see him as the type to sit down and negotiate, even if he's the more heroic of the two. He's more so the guy who'll want to keep moving on.
Bart has actual experience, but is it really good experience? Something to put on your portfolio for sure, but Angry Dad and Itchy and Scratchy cartoons still are objectively fairly mediocre. And this is coming from the person with the lowest denominator and echelon of humor around.
Some experience is still better than no experience. Not to mention that, once again, they have collaborators, and only Bart has collaborated with people in the showbiz world before, as opposed to Sonic's nil experience in the world of game development. What's he gonna do? Go to DeVry?
I disagree. I'd say bad experience is worse than no experience. Sonic may not be as savvy, but, some consumers complain about their products being too corporate. The main thing is, even if Bart is more experienced, his job is 10 times harder than Sonic's. Well, this wasn't exactly what I was expecting from this matchup, but it is definitely a really unique one. So let's get down to business. I have to side with Bart on this one for a couple of reasons. For one, Ducko has said that Bart is a cartoonist and has had amazing success with the Angry Dad and Itchy and Scratchy cartoons. Brandon did say that they were low quality, but from our perspective as viewers of the show, think about it like this. If Bart's cartoons were done in the same quality and style as The Simpsons, it would be the equivalent of him drawing hyper-realism in his own universe, hence the show used a super low quality art style. But even if we say his cartoons were badly animated, does it really matter? Think of all the badly animated shows people love. If you need an example, look at most Adult Swim cartoons. Another important point is one Brandon brought up about Sonic. That would actually backfire on him. If Sonic were to take Mario's game concepts like Galaxy or Odyssey, he would likely have less connection with Nintendo, which would mean he may not get into Smash, let alone do crossovers with Mario for things like the Olympics. Since Super Smash Bros. Ultimate released and has sold 13.81 million... Where is he going with this? Not to mention Sonic's inclusion in Brawl is one of the biggest events in gaming history, so cutting his possible connections with Nintendo would be a problem. I don't think Sonic's actually gotten more sales because he's in Smash. But ultimately, this match comes down to their mindsets and skills, which puts Sonic in a severe disadvantage. Bart is very goal-oriented, and will do whatever it takes to accomplish his goal as such, as raising an army to fight Nelson, pulling off some prank, or making animations for TV. Sonic, on the other hand, is fast-paced and impatient. I mean, hell, he will leave the game if you let him sit so long, and he always rushes headfirst at a problem. Sonic may be aware of his flaws, but after all, these shows, comics, and games still have them and don't fix them. So I personally feel that Bart would stand a better chance at accomplishing his goals. Tyranitar's pre-evolution Pupitar can destroy mountains just by stepping. Yeah!
That's potentially an interesting point in the first spot, and I'd like to expand upon it further. Bart knows that the biggest attention getter for The Simpsons these days are the couch gags done by different guest animators. What about specials revolving around that? Bart can come in with his notebook paper style, and he knows past, present, and future giants in the animation field who would love the opportunity to put their own spin on The Simpsons. I mean, it worked for Garfield that one time. What's more, knowing of the future, rather than trying to steal their ideas, Bart and The Simpsons could help kickstart the careers of anyone from Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, the Rick and Morty creators, to Jackson Public and Doc Hammer, the duo behind the Venture Brothers. This is being more proactive rather than destructive.
So the thing with that is, most of these animators have yet to make a splash. Bart can't just go up to them and say, "Oh well, you have a really successful show in the future. Want to give away your ideas for my own benefit?" Why would you steer away from being successful in the future in order to help this kid's cause? And who would tune in to watch animations from people without anything to their name yet? There are some animators you can get to cause a commotion, but not as many as there'd be nowadays.
Okay, this might sound really rude, but in all honesty, I think both franchises would end up worse if these two started getting involved. Sonic is way too sure of himself to realize that the game he's releasing might be a little, broken. Heck, this guy even seemed to imply that he's unaware of Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyrics' awfulness in a Twitter takeover and thought Sonic X was the best anime of all time. Then there's Bart who, in all honesty, would get The Simpsons cancelled. It would turn into a series with the quality of quirky Newgrounds shorts. If Bart trying to make a movie ended with, "For God's sake, turn it off! Turn it off!" I think they'd be better off without him. But as for who would leave their franchise in a better state, I'd say Sonic. I think his ego could allow them to dodge a few bullets. As much as I like him, I think Sonic might want Shadow to have stayed dead, so the focus could be on him more? Something like that. This would mean no awful spin-off game and half of 06 story elements would be impossible. Sonic, I think, would also be able to recognize flaws a little better. Maybe even hand the team some passive-aggressive comments like, "Wow, I feel so involved. I'm just pressing left and right," for the boost formula as it got worn out. If Sonic and Bart were sidelines, maybe they'd be more help for constructive criticism. But heading projects, I see Sonic being in a rut just as, if not worse than the one that it's in now. I see The Simpsons being a thing of the past, a series that ended in like 2002 or something. I guess you could argue that's better. I don't know, I guess my comment is actually pretty neutral, as I think both have an equal chance of getting their franchises down pat, which is low. Also, Bart probably wouldn't be as fine with Sonic about all this. He can't see his family for like 20 years. Sonic's been dragged out of his world away from his friends, like in Sonic 06 where Chris refused to let him go home. Or even in the Sonic movie where he left his world by choice to come to our boring ass world. Bart isn't without his advantages. He could prevent the writers from showing his penis in the Simpsons movie, which would be great. I guess I'll mention that Sonic isn't homeless too. In Sonic and the Secret Rings, he's seen sleeping in his home in the opening.
Well, the thing is, Sonic Boom is still on store shelves, so he can't really make fun of it. That's just poor business. Whereas he can make fun of games like 06, which are dead in the water. Before you make the argument, this just proves Sonic can't make a good game to save his life, Boom was made by an outside team. But I'll agree with the quirky Newgrounds thing. It's like a fine bacon. I won't finish that.
There could have been a period where Sonic was homeless, man. Maybe he finally realized that he could trade in some cash for gold, and bought himself the house later, though. I didn't address that earlier, but I do here now. As for the showing of his wiener, maybe Bart's not okay with that, but he shows his ass a lot. Okay, maybe this is not a good road to go down. Maybe the Simpsons movie in general could benefit from being sooner, more towards the show's peak, or maybe later, or at least as a comeback after the Simpsons may have ended with its goodwill intact. For the first part of the video, straw poll wasn't working, so maybe the poll will be back next time. But I've counted 4 comments for Sonic, 7 for Bart, and 1 sort of saying both lose. Ay caramba!
There's a lot of variables here, to the point where we had a hard time figuring out who rightfully wins. It's not a matter of failure because we both think they could succeed, it's just who does it better. Bart has actual experience on his side, though it may not actually be helpful. But I think Sonic's role is much easier for him to fill, as well as the fact he'd be more motivated and willing than the Simp. Strange, isn't it?
This is honestly the closest Galaxy Grudge match we've had, as determining it wasn't easy. Both Brandon and I were steadfast on our previous points. And honestly, we went in circles not really knowing which character had the edge. But at the end, after deliberating over it in the back room, our good friend Ribbit pointed something out, specifically from an episode of The Simpsons. In this episode, Bart finds his life is going into a rut, and ends up depressed over it. If he can find that actually living it, who's to say that he won't find it boring trying to literally stick his life to a script after a while? While he will have some control over it, it's not really like he can turn it into something outlandish, unless they want every episode to be a treehouse of horror. Not to mention that Bart said once that if he had a show, he'd run that sucker into the ground, which actually just leads to the same problem that the Simpsons have been having. I knew of this, but it wouldn't have helped me to bring it up before. On the other hand, Sonic comes from a more outlandish world, so he may bring a new perspective that could help his team.
This also bleeds into my idea that Sonic would probably be more willing to do this type of thing than Bart. Not only is he fine popping in and out of his own world, but he's more deprecating to want to do things right, no matter how fast he usually is. We see from the Sonic movie alone that he gets excited about our mundane world, whereas Bart is actually bored of his own world, which is more high octane and weird than ours. But like you said, this was a stupid close. Ribbit's point was the thread that tipped over the haystack. Had it been the other way around, I would have given it to Bart myself.
With all that having been said, we've both finally come to an agreement that Sonic could take this one.
So it's 1-1 between me and you, huh? How about our next match be a FNAF one? So it's a series we both love.
Shut the fuck up. Anyways, what could have happened in the world where Sonic won and Bart lost? Well, due to Sonic's new perspective, and learning how to gel with Sonic Team, games didn't come out as frequently now, but when they did, they were more of a polished final product, and one that more people look forward to, satisfying fans of both classic and 3D games. Due to the new creative spark in Sonic and Sega, they pull off the impossible and manage to not only save the Sonic series, but also Sega as a major console manufacturer, collaborating with Microsoft for the Dreamcast 2, strengthening both brands and lineups in various international markets. Meanwhile, Bart was doing fine. At first. But after constantly working on the show, suddenly the rut hits Bart. Bart feels working on the show has become monotonous. What once seemed like a new opportunity suddenly hits Bart with the same problem that others have been having with the show. It's going on for too long, and keeps treading a lot of the same ground, but in a less interesting way. Eventually, Bart decides to quit, and goes back to his own world. He gets choked out by Homer for his failure, but eventually, life goes back to normal. That sounds depressing, but it might happen. I don't know. Well, at least Bart goes on.
Ah, poor Bart. But Sega's making consoles again?
They may have seen another opportunity and took it, but who really knows? We don't live in that exact world. Anyways, let's quit clowning around and show what's coming up next.
not Bart Simpson. I'm my own original character, Bart Simpson.
I'm not Bart Simpson. I'm my own original character, Bart Simpson.